Alright, we have a good video today. I think this is day 8 of 365, and this is going to be a new thing that I'm going to be doing to warm up before every session I play. So right here in Poker Tracker, I have 5 hands loaded up. They're all big blind 3-betting from either button through MP. For this sim, I did big blind 3-bet versus cutoff, just because that's kind of like an average of all these spots. I think there's let's see, so like this spot, for example, is big blind versus cutoff. This spot is big blind versus cutoff as well. This spot is big blind versus button. Here, this is big blind versus cutoff. And this last board looks like it's big blind versus MP. So most of these are big blind versus cutoff. We have one big blind versus MP, one big blind versus button. But we're just kind of in general see how Pio plays these spots and see how close we played compared to what Pio would do in each of these situations. So we'll look at the first board here. Here, so 7-5 deuce is the first one we'll look at, and just so you guys can see how this hand played out, let me find this board. So this was the actual hand itself, and one thing that's very important to keep in mind here is we were 200 big blinds effective to start this hand, but in this Pio sim, I have it at 100 big blinds effective, just because in general that's going to be the stack depth that I'm playing on most often, so I prefer to analyze these spots at 100 big blinds. And then I'll often go back and rerun the sim at 200 bigs just to see what things change, but for right now we're going to look at this as if it were played with a 100 big blind effective stack. So how the hand played out, we had pocket kings in the big blind, cutoff opened to 2 bigs, we raised to 9, he called. Here's the flop. This is a board that I'm going to range check often. I just did decide to range check here. He checked back. On the 2 of spades turn, we went polar and overbet, 150% pot, got called. On the 8 of hearts river, we bet 150% again and get called by 6s. And so just want to see how our play here compares to Pio's preferred strategy on a board like this. So here we are, 725. These are the parameters for this sim right here. And let's take a look at what Pio's doing. So when given the option to bet half pot, 1/3, or check, Pio is betting half pot very often here on this board. If we look at the EV differential between check and this large bet, which is our preferred sizing with a hand like kings, we can see that there's really no difference in EV. So checking is about the same EV here as a half pot bet. But if we are going to bet in this spot and we look at bet 112, so or a half pot bet versus a 1/3 pot bets, you can see a lot of these hands are favoring the larger bets. It's just higher EV in general, which is why it's a higher frequency here in this spot. But a board like this, I will often play as range check, just to simplify my strategy. And the way you can tell if this is okay to range check in the spot is literally just by going into Pio here, checking these boxes, and seeing if there's an EV differential. The hands that are turning green here slightly are ones that prefer to check, and hands that are slightly red, like these boxes, are ones that prefer to bet. But they're mostly just white like this, meaning there's no real difference in EV. If there was like a full green box, that would mean this hand has a heavy preference to check. If there was a dark orange red box, that would mean there's a high preference to bet. But most of these hands, better check, EV of each is the same. So we decide to check here, and it does check through. If we pull the hand back up, it was this one, I believe. So yep, 7-2-5. Flop goes check, check, and the turn is the 2 of spades, and we bet 150% pot as OP here. So we'll go 2 of spades, and let's see what PO is doing. So if it is betting, we actually didn't give PO an overbet option here. But one thing that's important is in a 3-bet pot at 100 big blinds effective is an overbet sizing really isn't necessary just because the stack to pot ratio. Like betting 2/3 here is going to be enough to get stacks in by the river. Just because, or at least it should be. Let's see. So betting 175. Let's say we get called, and the river was an 8 of hearts. Yeah, so you can see now, like, we can just jam. So the bet's going to be 719 into a pot of 567. So we're just going to be jamming the river here. So we don't need to overbet the turn because we're able to get our value hands in by the river regardless. So we'll take a look here. Once this board goes check, check, and we're sitting here with kings, PO actually doing a lot of checking. And this actually might change depending on our effective stack size. So if I ran the sim at 200 big blinds effective, we potentially could see a lot more betting going on. But you can see once the board goes check, check, and we're out of position, PO is just, this is like a very common thing you'll see in PO sims is this insanely high check frequency. And you can see that basically every combo is higher frequency check than bet here. So although we did bet with kings and it worked out, check is generally going to be a play that PO prefers in this spot. Although we can see here with kings, so our specific combo was king of diamonds, king of spades, and we can see on this board that is the combo betting at the highest frequency, and the EV difference between check and bet with this combo is it's basically exactly the same, and it's basically exactly the same across all combos of kings. So really not that big of a mistake here. But checking also would have been a fine option in our spot. Had we checked and faced a bet, we can see that if we check again here, the imposition player is supposed to bet small with pocket sixes, which I believe was the hand he had here, right? Yeah, he had pocket sixes. So he would be betting small, and then I assume we raise with kings. And actually, kings, queens, jacks are just jamming all in here at a very high frequency versus small bets. So it'd be into a pot of 299 going all in with 890. Raise 260 is also an option, but we're never flatting with kings. So it's either a smaller raise or a jam. And this raise seems to be about 3x, 3.5x, looks like. But yeah, so we'd be raising with kings then. But as played, we bet, got called by sixes, 8 of hearts, river. We bet 150% pot again in the actual hand, but here in PO this would be a jam if we were at 100 big blinds. So if we jam, we can see villains doing some calling with sixes, but it seems like the cutoff here is nines really. Eights and sevens, fives are boats. So obviously calling with those hands. But in terms of like the non-boats, what pairs we're calling with, nines seems to be the cutoff here. And it's even it's the last over pair to the board essentially. Ace 8 is a pure call. Even Ace 5 is a higher frequency call than sixes. So likely should have been a fold from villain, but from what I could tell, he was quite a weak player, and our play in this hand seems fine. So we'll take a look at the next one now, and we're just going to go through all 5 of these. So it's going to be my warm up before my sessions now is reviewing 5 hands from my previous session. So here the board is Ace Queen 7, And if I pull up the sim of this one, it was this right here. So we had ace queen of clubs in the big blinds. Cutoff opens at 2.5 big blinds. We raise to 11. He calls, and we get this flop, ace queen 7. So we bet c-bet 1/3, get called on a 7 turn, pairing the bottom card. We decide to check from out of position. In position, checks back. And then on a 10 of spades river, we go for a 76% pot bet, and we get called by ace-6 suited. So we'll run this in Pio. I really wasn't sure on this 7 if my hand should just keep betting with how strong it is, or if this combo is going to be checking at any frequency when the bottom card pairs on the turn. I'm expecting this to be okay, or like not that big of an EV loss, but we'll look in Pio and see what the correct play should be. And I believe we were 100 big blinds effective in this hand. Yes, we had a nice stack, but this guy had 100 bigs, so we were 100 bigs effective to start this hand. So this looks good. So here we had ace queen of clubs, and Pio is just basically pure, just a 1/3 range bet. If I'm going to be 3-betting from the big blind and this board comes out, I'm basically just range betting 1/3 pot here with every single one of my combos. So we bet and we get called by ace-6 suited, which isn't even really supposed to be in villain's range, but he did have it in this specific case. Yeah, ace-6. So it obviously would have been a call here, as all aces are continuing, never folding an ace. So the turn was a 7 of hearts, I believe. Yep, 7 of hearts. Okay, and so we should still continue betting here with ace queen. Although the EV of check really isn't that much lower than EV of a 76% pot bet here. Like it's half a chip in EV differential basically. So the play isn't terrible. Same with ace king here. Should be betting but checking. Ace jack is kind of this cutoff where we start to check. And this is probably because we are chopping with all other ace x now when we have ace jack or lower. So we just have aces and 7s with a queen kicker, but when we have ace king, ace queen, we're beating all of villain's ace x, so it makes sense to keep betting a lot here. Which now I think about it, like villain has much more ace x, even when we're blocking an ace, villain has much more ace x than 7x. So I don't like my check so much, but it's not that bad. Like the EV difference is the same, and honestly, if I barreled 3 streets, villain might have folded the river anyway, so it might not have made a difference. But as played, we check, and we can see that any ace is betting at a decent frequency. Way 7's a boat, but for villain, like ace 5 is betting pretty often. Ace 4, EV of check. So the EV of betting is higher than the EV of checking, not by much though, for all these combos, or at least for ace 5. Ace 6 here, if villain does have it, check seems to be the preferred play, which is what he does, so he checks, and the river was a 10 of spades. And on a check-check turn, ace queen, betting 100% of the time. We chose a 76% sizing, which with this hand is fine. It's actually the highest EV option with ace queen of clubs specifically, so seems like the right play. And we get called by ace 6, which Pio is calling with any ace in villain spot, so pretty standard hand in the world of Pio. And things worked out for us here. I wonder what bluffs. Yeah, so villain just never really has any bluffs in this spot. Like these queen 10 could even like. Okay, so turning queen 10 into a bluff makes sense. And these combos, so really no bluffing ever going on. But okay, so that hand we seemed to have played fine. Now we'll look at next one. We have 3 more to look at. Jack 10-7. Parameters here. So this hand, Jack 10-7. Alright, this one here. So we are in the big blind with pocket queens. Middle position raised to 2.5. We made it 11 bigs. Got called. This is the board we see. So we bet 1/3 pots on this board, and I think Pio might prefer a half pot bet on this board often. But anyway, we get check raised. Decide to call. Villain shoves on the turn, and we decide to call with pocket queens. And I remember I decided to call here, just not blocking a diamond, so making it more likely Villain could have some type of combo draw with the queen of diamonds. Even though we're blocking king queen, he still has king queen of diamonds in his range. So and all queen of diamond combos, which caused us a call here. So we get it in here on the turn and got the bad news that he had pocket tens, but just wanted to take a look at this in PO, see if our call is alright, which I have a feeling that it is, but we'll see. So let's take a look here. So strategy here, yeah, PO heavily prefers a half pot bet on this board with pocket queens. With everything, basically, there's just not much small betting. The EV differential, though, is, very minuscule. There's no real difference in EV between a large bet and a 33% bet and a 50% bet here. But PO does prefer to go larger. But anyway, we bet small, and we can see Villain's raising range. Not even raising 10s at 100% frequency. 7s raising much more. But the EV of raise and call is basically identical. But generally in these spots, you're just not going to have much of a raising range from in position. But he does decide to raise with 10s, and now I'll get to see what I'm supposed to do with queens. So my specific combo was queen of hearts, queen of spades, which PO prefers to just jam all in with right here on the flop when we get check raised. The EV of call and raise are basically identical, and it seems like having the queen of diamonds is significantly better than not having here, but either way, we're still jamming very often with queens here. I just decided to call in the spot, which seems fine as well. So we called, and the turn was 5 of hearts. We check, obviously. We're checking our entire range here when we get raised on the flop. And Villain now, when given the option to shove or bet small, tens heavily prefers a small bet. Combos Villain it should be shoving with is Jack 10, 2 pair, and that's really it. All his sets, which are, it's basically the extent of his value, and 8-9. 8-9 even doing some checking here. So it's either check or small bet with this combo. Tens prefer small bets. But anyway, he decided to go all in, and we can see here with our hands, queen of spades, queen of hearts, it is just a 100% frequency call. Never not calling here, so our play seems fine. We were beat in this situation, but would have been a pretty big mistake to fold this hand, I think, in that situation. We can see now on the flop, having the queen of diamonds was so much better, but now when we're forced to call this turn shove, we really do not want to have the queen of diamonds because we're blocking the bluffs we want Villain to have when we hold the queen of diamonds ourselves. So we didn't hold the queen of diamonds, which makes this a snap call, basically. And yeah. So our play's fine there. And was that the third one we looked at, or the fourth? I think that was the third one. So now we'll take a look at this one. Jack 7-3. So how'd this hand play out? Alright, so we were on the button here and we raised to 2.25 bigs. The big blind 3-bet us to 9 bigs and we called on the button. This was the flop, Jack 7-3. We got villain c-bet small and we decided to check raise this hand with our gutter, which seemed loose, honestly, and I wasn't too sure about this. I just knew that villain had an incredibly high c-bet stats, and it seemed like after every time he 3-bet out of position, he was just c-betting every board. So having this bit of equity with my hand, I decided to check raise, and this is probably never a thing in PO. After seeing just how little we're check raising in these boards from in position, but this might be okay. So we're going to take a look at it now. Here are the parameters. So this is a range bet for the out of position 3-better from the big blind. So fine play from villain here as he bets 7 into a pot of 18.5, which is a bit small. PO does prefer a half pot bet here rather than the smaller size, but the EV differential I'm sure is not going to be that big of a deal. Anyway, so versus small bet when we have 5-6, this is just a pure call. Raising, definitely not a good play. Pretty big loss in EV here when we do raise. The only hands we're raising with are 3s, 7s, or even pure calling, and then queens as well when we raise. Some ace-jack is in there, but generally just pure calling in these spots is in position. Never much raising going on at all in these kind of 3-bet pots. So that was a mistake, but worked out for us in that situation. So good to do this review and just kind of see those mistakes I'm making and be sure not to make them in the future. So now we'll look at the last board, Queen 10-5, which was this one here, and we had King Queen. So King Queen of spades, we're in the big blinds. There was someone who just posted and then checked, this guy here from MP. So then cut off, raised the limp to 4 bigs, and we were in the big blind with King Queen of spades, and we 4x made it 16. So it was a pretty inflated pot. In this PO sim though, I ran it as if it was just a standard open and 3-bet. So the stack to pot ratios won't be perfect here, but we were a little bit deeper to start this hand anyway. We were 111 bigs effective. So it should be fine to look at the sim. So flop was 5, Queen 10. We bet small and 1, and I guess I just tagged this hand to see have we got called, how we should have proceeded on turn and river. So let's take a look. Strategy plus EV here. So with King Queen suited, this is basically a range bet, and this is a spot I would range bet as a 3-better out of position here. And with this combo, we're betting half pot pretty often, but generally when I am going to range bet in a spot like this, I'll just use a smaller size often. Especially on like a double Broadway board, I'll almost always just go 1/3 pot. There are some different board textures that I will prefer to bet larger, but on a board like this, I generally just bet 1/3, which we do. And had villain called, so we can see all pairs lower than a 10 without a diamond or folding, and even with a diamond, it's fine to just fold these. Our raises are 2 pair and 5s. Some kings in there for the raises. Ace 5. So how we got cold here? Villain would have a pretty strong range. it seems. Still some 5x, but we'll see what our play with king queen would be here if we get called on this board. For now, we'll just put out a random, like, 8 of spades turn. And so with king queen of spades, just king queen in general, without the flush draw, is doing a lot of checking now, which doesn't really surprise me that much at all. And we can see what Pugh is doing across all turns. So pretty high check frequency across all turns here from the out of position player. On an ace turn, it's basically a pure check. So yeah, very interesting to see that. And if we are going to bet with this hand, preferring to bet small for sure, as the EV of a small bet and check are very similar. If we were to bet small with this hand, and how we got called, if we see a brick river, I wonder if we are value betting this hand. We are, okay. So we value bet this hand small. Another 1/3 bet, okay. And then how we checked, villain's betting fairly often. If we face a large bet, king queen calls, and on a brick river, check. If we get jammed on, king queen of spades is not folding. Alright, so that seems relatively intuitive, and definitely don't want to have, like, king queen of diamonds is the worst combo to have here, obviously, because we're blocking the front door flush draw, which is the most obvious bluff draw that villain has here. So folding that one, calling with the other king queen combos, and that makes sense. So this was just my pre-session study. I'm going to go play for a bit now, and thank you for checking this out. We'll be back tomorrow with another video.